Hello everybody, welcome back to the kitchen. It's been a while since my last episode of Swamp Yankee Cookin'. So today I'm going to be doing pie crust. I've been thinking about doing this for a while, finally going to get around to it. My neighbor dropped off a whole bunch of rhubarb for me and I'm going to make some strawberry rhubarb pie. So I have two favorite pie recipes. Here's one of them. I'll show it to you. You can pause the video and take that down. I like to mix all of my ingredients in a Cuisinart. You can do it by hand using a fork or one of those pastry blenders, but it is just a lot easier to use a Cuisinart. So I'll just put all the ingredients in and chop it up until the butter is chopped up into roughly pea-sized pieces. You don't want them too chunky and you don't want them too small either. Because what the shortening chunks do, when you roll your dough out, that shortening, whether it's butter or Crisco or whatever, that kind of flattens out into a little pocket within the dough. And when you bake the pie crust, that butter melts and then the rest of the crust cooks, and then that butter soaks into the rest of the crust and it makes a flaky layer, because that layer of butter didn't allow those two pieces of crust to stick together, so it made a flake, and it also then the butter absorbed into the rest of the dough. Now another important thing is to keep the crust as cold as possible. I always keep my butter in the freezer, and that really helps. And also when you're mixing the water in, use ice water or cold tap water. And when you're rolling it out, try to touch it as little as you can with your hands, so you transfer as little heat to the dough with your hands as possible. Now the recipe I'm making, and the recipe that I showed you on the piece of paper, is for one crust. That is just a bottom crust. If you're making a pumpkin pie, for example, you just need this one recipe. But I'm making a strawberry rhubarb pie where I need a bottom crust and a top crust, so you'll need to double this recipe. And I'm making a half at a time just because it fits a lot better in the Cuisinart if I do just one crust at a time. There's my shortening. And cut it up into chunks so it's easier for your Cuisinart to digest. Okay, now we're all set. One thing I forgot to mention, I didn't put any water in here. That's the last step. You want to just chop the shortening and the dry ingredients together first. I like to use the pulse button. Now I have a bowl already. I dump this out. Now I'm going to repeat the same process again to make 2 crusts worth, and then I'm going to add the water. Alright, I have my dry ingredients and butter all chopped up and ready to go. I have some cold water. I'm going to pour it in just a little bit at a time. If you put in too much, you can't take it out. So I'm just going to start with half a cup or so. Even when the dough is fully hydrated, it's going to look pretty crumbly. It's not going to be a typical bread dough where it's one mass. It's going to be chunky, and that's what you want. If it's too wet, it'll be one chunk and it'll be difficult to manage.
Hi.
Hello.
What you making?
Pie.
Yummy.
And there's the pie taste tester coming in from work.
Hi.
So you see again, I'm just going gradually and just kind of scoop it in and rotate the bowl at the same time so everything gets mixed nice and evenly. And you see it's starting to get kind of chunky, but you just keep going a little bit at a time. And once you see it start making larger clods of dough, it's just about ready. If you make it too wet, it'll be a pain to roll out. It'll be sticky and unmanageable, but it should still taste okay. See, this is just about ready. See, if you squeeze a handful of it, it stays together in one chunk. So we're just about there, but I'm going to add a little bit more. Now the next step is to lay out some saran wrap. This is 2 pieces that I stuck together. And pour your crust onto that. Alright, now pull up the saran wrap and just kind of gently punch it together into one block of dough. And like I said, try to touch it as little as possible so your hands don't heat it up. There. Now just push it together into a ball. And since I'm making 2 crusts, I'm going to cut this in half and put one in the fridge to roll out later. I'm going to roll out the bottom crust first. You take 1/2, then just toss this in the fridge again just to make sure it stays nice and cool. Put the other piece in a ball, flatten that out. Take another piece of saran wrap and put that over the top. Now you can roll it out between the 2 pieces of saran wrap. After you roll it a little bit, it'll kind of get stuck to the saran wrap. So in that case, just peel it off. Pick up the top piece of saran wrap in the dough, pick it up, flop it back down, then do the same with the top piece. And it'll help the dough kind of flow a lot better. You pick up, kind of feel it like this to feel the thickness all around. Still a little thick. Peel off the top layer of saran wrap. Set that aside. You'll use that again. Now I'll show you how to transfer this to the pie plate. Take your pie plate, flip it upside down, center it in the crust, then pick up with the saran wrap and slide your hand underneath. Pick it up, then just gently flip it over like that. Now the crust is in the pie plate. Now you want to tuck the crust into the corners of the pie plate, but you don't want to stretch it when you're pushing it. So just peel back the crust and tuck it into the corner, just like so. Work your way around. Give it a little pat, make sure it's all in there. Now you can tear off the saran wrap. But if you're making a top crust, save it. You'll need it again. Now I'm just going to fold the crust in. We'll make it pretty later. Anyway, I'm going to put this in the fridge. I'm going to roll out the top crust the same way. And a little hint, after you roll out the top crust, you're going to need some time, of course, to prepare the filling and fill the bottom crust with it and everything. So once I roll out the top crust, I leave the saran wrap on it. I just kind of fold it up in the saran wrap. Then I can put it in the fridge easily. It's not going to stick to anything or tear apart. The saran wrap holds it together and kind of protects it. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to prepare the filling. Alright, now I'm making the filling. I've got my neighbor's rhubarb here. He's got some pretty impressive rhubarb plants. So I'm just going to chop these up in, I don't know, roughly half-inch to inch long sections. And use your calibrated eye to determine how much you need to cut up. Remember, it's 50-50. You're doing some rhubarb and some strawberries as well. Alright, I think I got enough rhubarb in there, so go for the strawberries. Unfortunately, the strawberries are store-bought. They're not homegrown or anything, but they'll be just fine. So I just used a small knife, cut out the leaf, and slice them into chunks right into the bowl. Okay, everything's ready and cut up. Now, I'm going to give it a little shot of cinnamon. I don't know how much, just, oh, that's not cinnamon. Haha, good thing I looked. That's Cajun spice. Do not want that in there. That's actually cinnamon. That's maybe a teaspoon. Then to help it thicken, see, this is going to be a really juicy pie. To help it thicken, put in a little bit of flour, maybe a tablespoon or two. Some people also like to use cornstarch to thicken it. That also works fine. Now the last ingredient to put in is sugar. Now I've probably mentioned before in my other videos that I like my food to taste like the food that it is. I like my apple pie to taste like apples, not like sugar with apple flavoring. So typically I don't like to put too much sugar in, but this is an exception because the rhubarb is quite tart. And even the strawberries are. The strawberries are a lot sweeter, but they still have a fair amount of tartness to them. So you do have to add a fair amount of sugar. And to this, I'm going to add a little over a cup of sugar. And this is I don't know, a 10-inch pie maybe. It's definitely larger than your standard pie, but not by much. You saw how big it is. So there's 1 cup. I'm going to throw in a couple extra spoonfuls. And that should be good. Now, just stir it all together. Don't be too abusive to the fruit. Just, you see I'm kind of taking my spatula and scraping down the side and pulling up through the middle. Kind of folding it together, if you will. That way the fruit doesn't get bruised or anything. And also all the sugar and stuff that settles to the very bottom, you scoop it up and pull that to the top. And you should do the same thing with the pie crust too. Stir it this way. That way all the little crumbs that tend to stay on the bottom and not get wet, you can make sure they get properly incorporated into the pie dough. Well, I accidentally didn't film the next step, but here's the finished result. The only thing left to do before I put it in the oven was fill it with the filling, put the crust on top, pinch the crust together, and then I kind of pinched it into this decorative wavy pattern there and cut 3 little vent slots in there so any steam in there can escape. Some people like to paint some half and half or egg whites or egg yolks or something on the top of the crust, maybe sprinkle it with some real coarse granulated sugar, and it makes it look pretty, but it really doesn't change the taste or anything, and I'm too lazy to do that, so I just bake it as is and it comes out just fine. Then I put it in a 450-degree oven for 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes was up, I reduced the temperature to 350 degrees for an additional 30 minutes, and at that point it's done. And you can take a knife and stick it through the slot there and make sure that everything is nice and tender and nothing is still undercooked. So let's take this out and let it cool down. Now, one other thing, when you're putting the crust on and trimming inevitably a little bit of excess, save the leftover pie dough. Don't throw it away. There's something you can make out of this. It comes out pretty well, and you'll just have to wait and watch the next cooking video to see what I'm going to make. Alright, it's cooled down a bit. So let's make sure that it's edible. Yeah, that is a juicy pie. You can see the crust is nice and flaky. Now, one problem I have with pie like this is that bottom crust, it's really hard for that bottom crust to get fully cooked. And it comes out okay. Sometimes it's a little mushy, but I don't know of any way to make it any better. As you see, there's plenty of juice in there. So let's give this a try. Yep. Perfect. Another good batch. Nice and sweet, not too sweet. The crust came out very well. Let's just get a better look at that crust. Nice and flaky. Golden, but not overcooked. Yeah, it came out pretty well. Yep, that's good, alright. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed watching this. I enjoyed making it, and I'm enjoying eating it. So if you make this, I hope you do. I hope you enjoy it. And see me next time on Swamp Yankee Cookin'. Thanks for watching.